Hi everyone! One of the most common things I hear from people with depression is that they know some of the things that they should be doing to feel better, but they just can't get going. They feel stuck in the inertia of depression, and no matter how much they want to, they just can't move forward with anything productive. In today's video, we're going to be continuing our multi-part video series on managing and overcoming depression. And what we're going to be talking about is how to overcome this depression inertia and to be able to reverse the negative impact that depression has on your behavior and stopping those negative feedback loops of depressed mood leading to less activity, which leads to more depression, which leads to less activity, and on it goes. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about overcoming depression inertia. So, if you've watched the first few videos in this series, you understand the importance of behavior change in overcoming depression. That depression is caused in part by the negative impacts that depression has on what you do. And we talked about the importance of setting goals that match your level of energy and motivation, and we've talked about thinking about how you think about goals and to make sure that goals meet specific criteria that almost guarantee that you're going to be able to succeed at those goals. So while all of that may make sense, you might be wondering, okay, what do I do with this information? How do I actually use this to start engaging in activities that I know I should be doing because they're likely to help me feel better? This is the key point. People with depression it's not that they don't know what they ought to do to feel better. If you ask someone with depression about what they could be doing to feel better, they might highlight that they should be getting more exercise, that they should be improving their sleep habits, that they should be socializing more, that they should be exercising more, that they should be getting more household chores done, that they should be budgeting better. All of these should statements that, while they're accurate, can serve as monumental weights that can suppress and weigh down a person with depression. The problem with depression isn't that the person doesn't know what they should be doing. It's that they don't have the energy or motivation or ability to be able to do these things. And so what we're going to be talking about is a method to take all of these bigger goals and expectations and aspirational wants that a person has and break them down into steps that a person with depression can actually take. And this is a 6-step process, which if you follow it can really help you get going and get out of the depression quicksand and depression inertia that often holds people back. So step 1 is to work on what I refer to as the problem list. To think about all of the things in your life that you want to change, all of the things in your life that aren't going well, all of the problems, difficulties, challenges that you're experiencing. Write down all of them, all of the things in your life that aren't going the way you want, and you can break them down into different categories. Things like problems with family, problems with friendships, problems with work or school, problems with lifestyle, finance difficulties, other difficulties. Break them down into categories. What this problem list does is that it gets all of the problems and challenges in your life out of your head and gets them down onto a piece of paper. The idea with this is not to worry about whether these problems are solvable or not. You don't have to come up with a plan yet. We're just focusing on writing down the problem, and you don't have to do all of this in just one sitting. You can take some time with this. Keep coming back to the problem list and keep adding to it. If you need more pages, that's fine. Keep adding things to the list until you can't think of any more problems or anything else to add to the problem list. Now you might be wondering, what's the point of this? How is this going to help me feel less depressed? Well, for one, it can be helpful just to have a sense of what are the issues that I need to be dealing with in my life. And like I said, get them out of your head and onto a piece of paper. The other benefit of doing this is that sometimes in depression, it can feel like your problems are infinite, that they go on forever. There's no end to your problems. By working on this problem list, what ends up happening is that you eventually run out of things to add to that list. It may take lots of pieces of paper, but eventually you begin to recognize that your problems are not infinite and that there is an end to the problems that you're experiencing in your life. Now, related to this problem list, you can also do a list of what are the things that you would actually like to have in your life. Imagine that you're living your ideal life and there's this camera crew following you around, videotaping what you're doing in your ideal life. So they don't know how you feel or what you're thinking. All they're doing is recording your behavior. What would you be doing? What would that video camera and that footage actually capture you doing if you weren't feeling depressed and if your life was the way you wanted it to be? You can add these items to the flip side of the problem list, or the what I would like in my life list. Okay, so we have this long list of problems and things that I would like to change. We have this list of things that I would like to have in my life. What do I do with all of this? Well, step 2 in this process is to pick one of those problems. We're not going to be able to solve everything or address everything on this list all at once. So where we start is just one problem. So for example, if one of the problems that you identify on the list is that you hate your job, we pick that problem and forget about dealing with any of the other problems on the list for now. So now I've picked one of these problems, and this is what I want to address. The problem is, I hate my job. Step 3 is to break the problem down into the various bits and pieces that contribute to that problem. Almost every problem is made up of smaller parts, and so what we want to do is to think about what are those smaller parts that make up this bigger problem. So with the example of I hate my job, you can think about what might be some of the factors that contribute to how much I hate my job. I have a coworker who's constantly trying to push their work on me. This is a dead-end job and there's very little chance that I'm going to get promoted or work my way up. I don't get paid enough. The commute to work is too long. I don't really understand what my boss expects of me. So now I have these various bits and pieces to this problem that contribute to me hating my job. So step 4, what we want to do is to take a couple of those bits and pieces and try to come up with possible solutions that might address those bits and pieces. This is where you want to brainstorm some possible solutions, and in doing so, don't try to get too caught up in whether or not the solutions are practical or realistic. Just let your creative juices flow at this point with regards to possible solutions to these bits or pieces. So for the example, the idea that my commute to work is too long, what are some possible solutions for that? I could look into doing more remote work, or at least part of the time doing remote work so that I'm not having to commute as much. Maybe I change my work hours to avoid heavy traffic. Maybe I move closer to work. Maybe I start taking transit to work so that I can watch movies or TV shows on the commute and make it be somewhat of an enjoyable experience. If one of the bits or pieces is that this is a dead-end job and there's very little chance that I'm going to get promoted, some of the solutions could include looking for a different job, taking on extra responsibilities at work to try to get noticed by some of the higher-up executives, speaking with my boss about my desire to take on more responsibility, speak to the owner of the company, express my concerns about potentially not moving up in the company and seeing what options there might be available. So at the end of step 4, I've got all of these potential solutions that could address one or two bits and pieces that make up this problem. Now, step 5, what I do is I lock into one of those possible solutions. Look for a solution that's reasonably easy to carry out, something that I'll likely be able to do. Pick a solution that's also likely to help with the problem. And hopefully it will be something that I haven't tried multiple times before and have been unsuccessful with already. So I pick one of the possible solutions. And maybe my solution is that I'm going to look into doing remote work part of the time so that I can cut down on how much time I spend in traffic commuting to and from work. And now step 6 is that we take this solution and we make it a goal. And this is where those 4 features of goals that I talked about in the previous video become absolutely critical. Those 4 features of goals are: is the goal specific? Do I know exactly what I need to do? Is the goal defined in terms of my behavior, not how I feel doing it and not the behavior of someone else? Does the goal have a clear end line, yes or no? Will I know whether or not I've succeeded at the goal? And am I 95% certain that I can accomplish this goal? If not, I either need to scale it back or pick something else that I am 95% certain that I can do. So in this situation, the goal that I might set for myself is to email my boss to schedule a meeting to talk about options of me working from home more. And now notice what I've done is I've taken all of these aspirational expectations, all of these larger goals and wants in my life, and I've whittled them down into something that I can do this week to begin to make some positive changes in my behavior and hopefully begin to address and resolve some of these problems in my life that I would like to change. And so I can make this small behavioral change that this week likely isn't going to eliminate my depression. But it does take me one step toward making some hopefully positive changes in my life. And in turn, that will start the process of helping me feel better. Now, it's important to point out that there are some common pitfalls that depression will set up for you as you go through this process of behavioral activation, goal setting, changing the behavior side of the triangle that we've talked about. And the first of these is that depression will try to get you to do way too much. Often people have too high expectations of themselves, and they're not being able to complete everything they set out because it's far too overwhelming and far too challenging to do it all. And this can be a big problem in goal setting because what can happen is that the person doesn't break down the goal into a small enough step. So to avoid this pitfall of trying to do too much, the idea is to remember and focus on that 95% rule. Am I 95% certain that I can do it? And if not, what I need to do is make the goal smaller, because what I'm doing is less important than the fact that I'm succeeding at what I'm doing. The next pitfall that depression will set up for you is that you feel discouraged after 1 or 2 steps. You start to take some steps towards this goal and shortly thereafter begin to feel discouraged because it feels so overwhelming, or it feels like I'm not making any progress. And so this is why it's important to think about the steps that you've already taken rather than focusing on how far you still need to go. Again, the focus is on success of things that I've accomplished rather than the lack of things I haven't accomplished or the potential failure of things I might try to accomplish in the future. And the third pitfall that depression will set up for you is that it will get you to minimize what you've accomplished and to disqualify your successes. So what if I emailed my boss about having a meeting and we're going to have a meeting next week to talk about work from home options? Yip-de-dee-doo. That accomplishes nothing. Well, no, it doesn't actually accomplish nothing. It accomplishes something. I now have a meeting with my boss that might lead to some positive changes with my work. But even if it doesn't, what it tells me is that I've committed to doing something and that I followed through on that commitment. And if I can do it for something like sending an email to my boss, I can do it for something like responding to that text message from my friend. Success is success, and when you're recovering from depression, you really need to think about those successes, because depression will constantly get you to focus on all of the other things that aren't going right. And if you want to learn more about how to use goal setting to establish a sustainable lifestyle, I encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.